out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube, we're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And now for today's topic.
Welcome back to this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, and we're going to be discussing Aedes mosquitoes, particularly Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, and why they are so difficult to control. Now, the word mosquito is formed from two words in the Spanish language, mosca, meaning fly, and ito, the diminutive of small, meaning small. So actually the word mosquito comes and the term means a little fly. Now we're going to go and get into some insect biology here and discussing this. And one of the things we're going to be discussing is the order that they're in. And they belong to the order, what is known as taxonomy in the animal kingdom. And it belongs to the order of Diptera. Now, Diptera means a two-winged fly. So that's where most real flies belong to. It comes from two Greek words, di, meaning two, and petron, meaning wings. So Diptera means a two-winged fly. Now, it also belongs to the superorder of what is known as Colissodiae, where we get mosquitoes and midgets belong to the same family. And there are a couple of other midgets in there that belong to that family or that superorder, but they belong together. And they belong to the family of Colicidae, which is the mosquito, coming from the Latin word culex, meaning gnat. So that's how we get the term mosquito and the taxonomy of where they belong. Now, the Aedes genus has more than 950 species of mosquitoes in it. We're only familiar with really two or three of them, the Aedes aegypti and the Aedes albopictus, because these are the ones that do the biting and transmit the majority of the diseases or viruses. They're vectors of different viruses. All right. So in the United States, the Aedes aegypti is found in about 23 states right now, including the southeastern U.S., on the East Coast from New York all the way to Indiana and Kentucky. So Texas and the southern part here in Florida, it is a major mosquito problem. And, they also been found, like I said, all the way west to Indiana. Now, how can they survive in cold environments? Well, that's the reason why they're so difficult to control, because Aedes mosquitoes, the eggs, can stay dormant in the south up to 6 to 8 months after there is no rain and in cool weather. And then all of a sudden we get a rain and these eggs hatch. And this is what people don't understand, that just because it's cool and it's not raining does not mean that we don't have Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. I mean, you overly, have the overwintering of the mosquitoes in the Northeast where you get the snow. But in the southern part of the United States, we can have them all year round. And they're just, unless if the temperatures drop really low where the eggs don't incubate, that's a different matter. But in most of the country where this mosquito is alive, the eggs are very resistant to drought. And all of a sudden, they laid the eggs, and it didn't rain, or there is no water in the containers where they laid those eggs, and all of a sudden the sprinklers come on because you turned them on 2 weeks later and the eggs hatch. Or all of a sudden it hasn't rained for a month and it rains and the eggs will hatch. And this is why it's such a difficult mosquito to control, because unless you're applying some type of biological control product, or insecticide, especially biological or insect growth regulators, on a continual basis, you won't get control of the eggs. And the problem that we have with insect growth regulators in the open environment is that none of them will last more than 2 weeks. If you read the label, some of these will say they'll control fleas and ticks indoors up to 6 to 7 months, and they'll control German roaches up to 7 months indoors. But once the photostability, if you read the label, and it says it's photostable for only up to 2 weeks. So if there's light outside, unless you use them in a granular form, which is a slow release form, in where there's actually sitting water, you're not going to get up to 28 days. So if you've got a mosquito program where you're canceling it in the winter months, and you're in the south, you're still going to have the mosquitoes breeding. And this is why we prefer to do our mosquito control from maximum control for our clients every 2 weeks, because we just don't, we can control the adult mosquito when they land on the plants with microencapsulated insecticides for 14 to 28 days. You're not going to get 30 to 90 days on that kind of product on average. It just depends on which part of the country you're at. Remember, we're in a subtropical environment here in South Florida, where we're the only subtropical environment in the entire country. We're a unique ecosystem here in South Florida compared to the rest of the country. So what we experience here, most people will not experience in the rest of the country. And this is why large national companies have programs that really don't work well down here, because they come with the same mentality that they're treating in the north or in the north, the northeast or the west part of the country or the central part of the country, which is totally different. So a little bit of biology here on the mosquito. The Aedes mosquito has 4 life stages: egg, larvae, pupa, and adult. That is the complete life cycle of an Aedes mosquito. Okay, now it takes about 7 to 10 days from egg development into adult. So it's very quick. We're talking 7 to 10 days. I mean, the entire life cycle of the mosquito can take, up to 2 months maximum, but on average, it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks. The lifespan in an adult mosquito is 2 to 4 weeks. And after a blood meal, an adult female can produce an average of between 100 and 200 eggs. Now, she doesn't lay them all usually in the same site, but she can. She can divide it among different sites. But that's how many she's going to do. Now, she can produce up to 5 batches of these eggs if she can get 5 blood meals during this lifespan. And, Aedes aegypti typically only bite people, but Aedes albopictus will bite people and animals. So Aedes albopictus can live in wooded areas where there's animals, rodents, deer, pets. They can attack your pets. And so it's a different insect, and they have a little different behavior, where Aedes aegypti primarily prefers to be in areas where there's people because they need to bite people. Okay. Now, both of them can bite. They'll take their food from nectar of plants or from the juices of plants by sucking it out of them. Now, the male only does the nectar and juices of plants, and the female only does blood. But both can do both the nectar and the juices of plants to survive. And what they're excreting, okay, is the liquid that they, basically the sugar that they can get from the nectar. This is why ATSBs, attractant toxic sugar baits, are very effective at controlling both Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus populations, because both of them will sit on plants and suck the nectar out of them. And if you're using an ATSB with a toxic sugar bait that kills the mosquito, you will get almost a natural mosquito control. Okay. Now, and one female, now understand this, that one female is going to lay between 500 and 1,000 eggs in her lifetime in just 2 to 4 weeks. So that is an enormous amount of population. This is why a lot of the people who do vector or do city control have a very difficult time because they can't spray as often as needed to control the problem. And what I tell my clients is, listen, the reality is if you want mosquito control, you're going to have to pay for it either on a biweekly basis to get optimal control, because then all of a sudden in 2 weeks that there is no IGR there's no insect growth regulator, whether you're using a juvenile hormone mimic or whether you're using a chitin synthesis inhibitor, they're both going to last about the same amount of time, about 2 weeks outside. And then you might get a longer residual on the adults with residual control insecticides, like, microencapsulated pyrethroids. Okay, so this is where the balance is, that what's going to work in one home for one client isn't going to work in another. Okay, because the dynamics of that neighborhood is different. If you've got a lot of trees with holes, mosquitoes, if you get all of a sudden a big rain shower, they can lay those eggs inside that tree trunk and basically hatch in there. And if you can't spray that area, well, how are you going to transmit it? Now, certain pyriproxyfen, it will transfer to certain areas if the mosquito will land and then transfer to other bodies of water. Okay, but it's not so with some other with some other insect growth regulators, some IGRs. All right, and like I said before, if you got standing water, pots, gutters are a big problem. People do not clean out their gutters, and they're wanting mosquito control without cleaning out the gutters. And you have leaves in there that are moist, and the larvae can live there, and they can hatch and live and reproduce right there. They don't need always standing water. This is why Aedes can adapt to pretty much anywhere and multiply and become such a big problem when it comes to transmitting diseases, because they carry or they transmit so many diseases. They're a vector of about 5 or 6 diseases now. Okay, so the all of a sudden, like I said, you have bromeliads, you have plants that hold water, you have holes and stubs, you have gutters, you have a neighbor that doesn't clean his gutters, a neighbor that leaves a bird bath without being treated. And what happens is that mosquitoes don't fly more than 100 to 300 feet from where they're born. So you might not even have the mosquito problem on your property. The mosquito problem is actually on your neighbor's property, and he's breeding them and they're flying over, but you can't control the breeding. You can really only get adult control, and that's very limited because you're at a disadvantage at a 1-to-100 ratio with the breeding. And if you're only killing one adult and you still have 100 being born, you're at a disadvantage all the time. So this is why it's important to get a survey of pretty much the entire block when you're doing mosquito control for a client and evaluate. You've got storm drains that are not being treated by the city, and they're across the street. You're going to get mosquitoes. I mean, I got people who have mailboxes that have little planters at the bottom. They don't have any plants, and the water is being laid there, and the mosquitoes are breeding right in the mailbox because they have this decorative mailbox. So you really have to look at all these dynamics when you're looking at mosquito control to get effective control for your client. And the client has to understand that just because they are spraying, if they're neglecting and leaving water outside, they have lots of plants outside in the garden, and they having water in those trays, those all need to get treated. Okay, so what are we looking at with diseases now? Well, the thing is that mosquitoes, especially Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus mosquitoes, are what are known as transmitter of what are known as flaviviruses. And what a flavivirus is a genus of a single strand RNA virus in the family, of Flaviridae, which is the way the bacteria is, or the bacteria grows, the virus. So you got Aedes aegypti, which is now a transmitter of originally known as the yellow fever mosquito, which was discovered in Cuba back in the 20s, at the turn of the century, 1900. By 1921, the Reed Commission went into Cuba and actually was able to discover that it was the Aedes aegypti mosquito. It was known as a Culex mosquito back then. It's now we know it's the Aedes aegypti mosquito, was the original transmitter of yellow fever. And what we know about that is that it also transmits dengue, chikungunya, and it transmits Zika virus. So it is a very dangerous mosquito because it transmits so many diseases. The species of Aedes album known as the Asian tiger mosquito. We also have the Aedes cincinnurus and vexans, Aedes vexan, which is the inland floodwater mosquito. So there are many types of Aedes mosquitoes that have a lot of problems, but Aedes aegypti is the big concern. Getting into a little bit of the control, sanitation is the number one thing. What they discovered in Cuba and in Panama when they did the Panama Canal is, hey, sanitation, eliminating of water sources is going to be the number one control. This is the most natural control. If you want natural mosquito control, get rid of the water sources. Get rid of those dirty gutters. Get rid of the bromeliad plants. Get rid of the plants outside that are having, the bases, which you're having little trays full of water all the time. Get rid of the bird baths. Or if you're going to have a bird bath, clean it out every couple of days so that the larvae can't grow in there. So you need to hose it out or, put something in there to clean it or be treating it on a regular basis. One of the new novel products that came into the market was the IntoCare mosquito trap, which I've been following the development of this trap for several years now, especially in places like Malaysia, the Philippines, in different countries where they've been doing what are known as ovi traps and ovipositioning traps, and doing the study with different hormones, with different analogs, with different like pyriproxyfen, with Bavaria bassiana. And I was wondering when they were going to develop it and bring it here to do it. And it finally is here. So this is something that I've been watching for a very long time. And it's not new to us. It is just a new novel. It's new to us. It's not a new concept. It's been probably being done for 20 years, the testing on this type of, and it's proven to be very effective overseas because it's very low cost to do. Unfortunately, here in the U.S., it's a very high cost product. Mosquito control, realistically, for the average homeowner is a luxury item. I want to enjoy my backyard. I want to be able to grow to grill my steaks at 6:00 in the afternoon when I want to. And that's the time when an hour before, an hour after, mosquitoes are there. So it's basically a lifestyle product, mosquito control. It really isn't a vector disease problem in the U.S. like it is in Africa, like it is in the Philippines, like it is in Malaysia, where, hundreds of thousands of people are dying around the world, millions a year because of the mosquito diseases. Sure, we get freaked out every once in a while here because we got a scare like the Zika. And then all of a sudden, everybody's back to normal again. Nobody's paying attention to draining their sources. Nobody's covering up. Everybody goes back to life as normal. But this new product called IntoCare mosquito trap, which is pyriproxyfen, Bavaria bassiana GHA strain, and brewer's yeast. And what it does is it makes it attractive so that the mosquito wants to be there. The brewer's yeast creates carbon dioxide, and the mosquito wants to go there and wants to breed. And then the pyriproxyfen kills the larvae and the eggs. And then also it transfers when the mosquito lands on the water with his legs. It's got a little mesh that the mosquito can land on to lay its eggs in the water comfortably, and then it becomes in contact with it, and then it can transfer it over to another site. It has a high concentration, like 75% pyriproxyfen, very high, more than what we normally use it at a 1% solution when we spray it. This thing is like 70%, I believe, in there. And the Bavaria bassiana GHA strain, which is a bacteria that kills and grows on the mosquito adult to kill it. And what's interesting about Bavaria bassiana, we've been using this strain for a decade in ornamental care for the control of, white flies, aphids, mealybugs, all the kind of pests. We know it as Microtrol, and the other product that we use for the control is I lost my train of thought now. But we've been spraying it in landscapes and in nurseries forever. It's been available. I was having discussions about this product back in 2007, 2008 with the manufacturer, BioWorks, and about being able to use it. The problem is there was no label for it to be used in residential environments. We do have it now. Interestingly enough, Bavaria bassiana strain GHA is the same thing that is used now to control bed bugs. It is a new product to control bed bugs, and we can control bed bugs now with the same strain. It's just you can't use the same label as the product used in landscapes, but it will control mosquitoes also. The problem when you spray Bavaria or you're using any biologicals like Bacillus, known as BTI, or you're using spinosad, these products don't last long in the environment. They're designed for spray and kill. In other words, whatever's there, it's going to kill right there and then. It's going to last 1 or 2 days. The advantage is it doesn't kill or interfere with most other insects because it's very specific. It's very host specific. Okay, so that's the advantage. It doesn't affect us as humans. It doesn't affect fruits. So it is used in a lot of fruit production for that reason. All right, so attractant sugar baits are another way to use it together with Into-Care, because if you're spraying for mosquitoes and you have these mosquito traps, you can contaminate them. That's a big concern. And the Into-Care trap only deals with Aedes mosquitoes, Aedes albopictus, Aedes Aegypti. It does not deal with Culex. It does not deal with Anopheles mosquitoes. Okay, so that's one of the things that you have to know. It is very specific because it got an emergency registration because of the Zika problem in the U.S. It got an emergency registration, which allows us to use the trap without being federally registered at that time. And this is one of the reasons why you have to take that class to use Into-Care before you can use it. And this is why it's not available to the public. Okay, so that's the not to mention they are expensive. Okay, they're ranging anywhere between $15 to $25 a trap to purchase, plus about $7 for the little sachets which come with all the tools inside, and it comes with the replacement band and everything that you have to do. It's a labor intensive product that you have to put it in, you have to change it out. You're talking $7, and you got to buy them at a minimum of 100 now. There's only one supplier that is selling it in the U.S., and that is Univar. Initially, Univar was only selling it in 100 pieces. Now they're breaking the pallets, and I think they're selling them anywhere between 10 to 25 units at a time. But still, it's a big investment, and it is an expensive product. It is a luxury ticket item. And the way I tell my customers, and I'm blunt, and I'm saying, listen, look, this is a luxury ticket item. You're going to buy it because you want it. When people walk into a Bentley's or a Mercedes dealership, they're not there to haggle a $500 deal. They're there because they want the car, and they're going to buy it. And this is for customers who understand, who are educated, who understand the ecology, who doesn't want to harm the ecology, who are willing to pay. It's kind of the same people who are willing to pay for Priuses, to get 50 miles to a gallon, and they're willing to pay the price that a Prius costs. You're buying, an electric car, because you can afford it. And that's the reality. I don't mince the words because we don't have to convince people to buy this. They either can afford it, they want it, and they're willing to pay for it, or they're not, and they can't do it. And there's just no way around it for us because the prices are fixed by the manufacturers. So we can't do anything about it. We can't negotiate those prices. We're not going to get any breaks on them. When we're dealing with juvenile hormones, S-methoprene is one that is good, like Altacid, which comes in the granular. So if you're spraying it in water areas that are standing water, that one will give you up to 28 days of control in the granular form, not in the liquid. Navaluron, which is a chitin synthesis inhibitor, is also an insect growth regulator. If you're not using insect growth regulators when you're doing mosquito control, you're really not going to get effective larval control, because even a product like bifenthrin can get larval control, but only up to 7 days. Okay, so the studies show that it's only 7 days. Use of microencapsulated pyrethroids like deltamethrin, lambda cyhalothrin, beta cyfluthrin, esomvalorate. Those are products that you can use that are microencapsulated. You want to use a microencapsulated product because that's what's going to give you the most residual outside from photodegradation. Remember, photodegradation is your biggest degradant in leaf and foliage and surface control because the sun breaks it down so quickly. Also, by adding to the mix PBO. If you add PBO, which is a product like Exponent, which is a synergizer, it's going to double the effectiveness almost of your microencapsulated products. Okay. And then if you add a surfactant to that, a sticker sprayer, then you're going to get a much better adhesion. So this is why mosquito control, to do it right, is very expensive because you got to use 3 to 4 products to get the longest residual for your client that you could possibly get. So one guy just goes in and says, I'm just using bifenthrin for everything because it's cheap and my customers won't pay. Well, then you can't really get them the control they want. You can't have it both ways in this world with products because understand that the only product that you ever sell to a client that is biological is plant care and insect control. Everything in the house is dead. The paint is dead. The walls are dead. The wood is dead. The only thing that's alive is the plants and the insects and diseases on those plants. And biological things have minds of their own. You have to control them based on their life cycle, their habit, their biology, not the customer's ability or willing to pay. That is never the determination on how you get control. And this is why so many people, when they go to large brands or they go to large franchises, they get disappointed because they only have one product that 80% of the market is willing to buy, but unfortunately it doesn't work for everybody. So the 20% that are left with us specialists that know how to deal with all this and can customize a program for our clients that gets them the control they want if they're willing and able to pay for it. Because that is how complicated it is, dealing with all these issues. And unless you have this training, unless you have this information, you're being told to go spray something without knowing if you're ever going to, it's a shot in the dark. You don't know. So I hope this has helped you understanding why especially Aedes mosquitoes, especially Aedes aegypti mosquito, is such a big problem and is such difficult to control, and why diseases can outbreak so quickly because of the habit of this mosquito. This has been Frank the Pest Geek, wishing you a pestacular day. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.